Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I am so delighted we're here today. We have a very special guest coming right up. Our guest today is Shaman Jon, otherwise known as Spiritual Advisor and Shaman to the Stars. Now, Shaman Jon is a full-time shaman, advisor, speaker, and author of the book, Dreaming Your World into Being, The Shaman's Secret to Having the Life You Deserve Now. He also has a couple CDs. One's titled Practical Meditations for the Modern Lifestyle, which is amazing, and Shamanic Journeys to Empower Your Life. Shaman Jon regularly conducts both individual, private, and couple shamanic healing sessions, both in his office in Monterey and at the Post Ranch Inn in Big Sur, California. Shaman Jon's been featured as an expert on television series such as Chelsea Does and The Lowe Files with Rob-Lowe and his sons. So today, Shaman Jon's here to talk about mastering your path. So let's welcome to the show, Shaman Jon.
Thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure to have you here. My goodness. I mean, I had such a dramatic experience in our time together. I couldn't wait to share you with everybody.
Thank you so much. I always appreciate an opportunity to share this beautiful and powerful work, you know.
Well, let's start with that, because a lot of people are like, well, how do people get started as a shaman, and how did you even follow that path?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there are people still, probably since the beginning of humanity, that are born with the calling, essentially the one person in the village that really wants to devote their life to service and helping improve the quality of life of everyone else, for example. And, in this particular case, maybe has some gifts, has ability to see things, is hypersensitive, can feel things, really empathetic and ability to dialogue with nature in both physical and non-physical form. And, even though we don't recognize that person, in our modern cultures, it doesn't mean they've stopped being born, So I still think in all cultures around the world, there's still these people. And and there's a lot of different sort of ways that can be expressed, artists and doctors and actors and writers and healers of all kinds. And so I had those gifts. And so I was really, I didn't have any context for it, though. I was raised in sort of suburban family. And, but so as a child, I had a lot of these interesting experiences, like out of my body and knowing things I shouldn't know. And I even had a few near-death experiences early on that helped me to, experientially know what the non-physical worlds are like. We call it mapping the territory. And there's sort of easy ways and hard ways to do everything. And that's the easy way would be in a kind of a primary culture that still recognizes shamanism, and they would do ritual and ceremony and so on. And the hard way was, accidents. And but it did give me some good experience that later, as I began to study my late teens, all the sort of healing modalities and spiritual traditions and religions and shamanism, I could really piece it together and make sense out of it. And then was able to sort of start meeting teachers and learning.
Was there a point where you, because I know I've heard this from other people who, as you're growing spiritually, you get to a point where you're working with one spiritual teacher or another and you kind of plateau with them?
Yeah, I thought it was great because there are a lot of specialties in terms of all, sort of healing and psycho-spiritual work. And I was fortunate to get involved deeply in many of them. And there were moments where I felt like there was more, that could be discovered or addressed. And and I, sort of, I think, set that intention, and as always, the universe kind of delivers. And I remember sort of wanting to, to continue to get new information, actually to kind of figure out who I was at this point in my journey. In my early, I think, 30s by then, I was working as an engineer, actually, for a living, and I recognized that wasn't my passion, and I had already studied all the books that say to find your passion and your purpose and so on. And I went to one of my powerful healers, and I asked him, what is it that I'm really here to do? On the side, I had all this sort of knowledge and experience in these healing modalities, so I could help people kind of informally, who came into my cubicle or whatever at work. But I really wanted to know what I was, what kind of work I really would be excited about. And I didn't think I could be a shaman. I didn't really put that together because I wasn't sort of from a primary culture. I didn't think you could be a sort of modern person and do that at that point. And I asked him, and he went off into his altered state, and he came back and he said, well, my guides are telling me that they're giving me the words mediator of souls between the worlds. And I had no idea what that meant, and neither did he, so I didn't really know what to do. But he said, don't worry, you'll figure it out one of these days, And about 3 years later, having read a book by this Dr. Alberto Villoldo about shaman, called Shaman Healer Sage, which I loved and I thought was very comprehensive. It covered so much of everything else that I had already studied, that I went to his workshop. And I sat down, and Alberto sat down, and the first thing he said was, a shaman is just a mediator of souls between the worlds. And so that was my answer, right? It was like, You're a shaman. And I was like, oh, okay. That was a lot scary. But he has a really good training program that I dove into, and then it was just from the first session on, and the results that were happening, and what I was able to do that I didn't know before in terms of these gifts. It sort of took off from there.
Yeah, you definitely are very gifted. I mean, I could tell from the time that we spent together, and it was a pretty profound time personally. And you've been working with, people all across the spectrum. You've been working with entrepreneurs and movie stars and you name it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I personally am a very I don't know how you would say it, but sort of passive in terms of, like, I don't have a real agenda or sort of like a set of goals or whatever. But I just wanted to be able to use my gifts. I mean, I really loved doing it, and I really wanted to be of service, and I really wanted to have the biggest impact I could have. I think since my first sort of near-death experience at age 4, I got a really sort of clear view of, like, the whole picture of everything going on in the world and the universe, and I could see and feel already that things weren't right, that the world was upside down, which these Karo teachers of mine and this lineage that Alberto brought to us was called the Pachacuti, the world turned over, where the feminine had largely, been suppressed, and the masculine was sort of in charge and running things, and it was a mess, and it was pretty obvious. And I was very upset, and I told my mom, even at that age, look, I can't believe it's still like this, and I think I want to go back. I said, I can't, really, I can't believe it, and but obviously I continued on. But the point being that, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but I think basically, I was driven at that point to fulfill a vision of the world where things were right side up again. The feminine was in charge, which I think is really the solution to every big problem on the planet, from climate change to poverty to environmental issues to disease to obviously the way women are treated, and so that's what has driven me ever since then. And I've just, it's my one prayer to say, look, make me the greatest service I can be in this way. And that has, I think, synchronistically brought me to places where the kind of people that come to me as clients are potentially, impactful, at the highest levels of, business and government and healing around the planet. And so that's been a really wonderful thing.
Well, you might not mention it, but I'm going to brag on you. So our listeners, if I know many of them watch the Lowe Files, and you've been on the Lowe Files a few times with rob-lowe.
Yeah, that was kind of a funny synchronicity, all these little things that I've ever mentioned in my life. God, it'd be really nice to work in a village in a little hut in a place like Esalen, and a year later I get asked to come work at the Post Ranch Inn in Big Sur, right? Which is sitting in a yurt by some village. Literally, so the universe delivers, right? Yeah. And that's like the mediator of soul things, and so I probably a few years ago was like, God, I love these ghost adventure type shows, and it'd be really fun to have, do that. I'd love to be in one of those. And I kind of forgot about it and all that. And I guess usually the best way to manifest things. And, shortly thereafter, I think I ended up, getting, Rob and his family as sort of, clients, and we, sort of became pretty good friends. We hang out a lot. And at some point he, I guess, decided to do this show with his boys, and, his wife Cheryl was like, you should have John in the show, Rob. So he goes, okay. And so sure enough, there I was, ending up being exactly on one of those kind of shows, and it was a lot of fun. It was really a lot of fun.
Well, and it must have been great also because you're sharing with people a bit of shamanism that maybe they're not otherwise exposed to.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot that obviously when they edit the shows, there's probably another hour's worth of stuff that could have gone on that one first episode. But certainly, I think, I always sort of attribute where I end up to the shamanic lineage, basically my team. I've been initiated by these Caro Indians and other sort of long-lived, unbroken shamanic lineages, and I really feel, and they're very engaging, and they really show up. They show up in people's dreams, and they show up when I can't show up and do work on them anyway. I used to dream of, them working, teaching me, and so they're very, interesting in terms of the non-physical, our spiritual engagement. They really show up, and so I feel a lot of times like they're sort of putting me, here and put me there, and I just kind of go where they put me to be of service, right? So I think that's one of them. It's any way that that can help. It's good.
Yeah, kind of move people forward. Because I think a lot of times when people think of, a shaman, they're not quite sure what that exactly means. And for you as a Anglo shaman, I'm sure it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's been actually, interestingly enough, been really a challenging part of it. Facing this sort of, it started with myself, like how could I be a shaman, right? But then I've learned that has nothing to do with it, that there's been shamans in every culture on the planet. But yeah, a big part, I think, of being looking the way I look, I guess you might say, or having my genetics and background and upbringing, is being a bit of a bridge, between those two worlds where, hey, these are really valuable, practical, pragmatic processes and approaches to healing and empowering and transforming that should still be available to all, to everyone, even the modern cultures. And so sort of reclaiming that, I think, and being able to have someone like myself that I think can do a pretty good job of explaining it right in a way that doesn't lose people completely, like, sort of re-educating people. What is shamanism actually, and what isn't it? And how can we use it? Like that, I believe, is a big part of it, and I'm happy that I can play that role.
Well, and with your level of giftedness, it's easy to see that this is a life passion of yours, because I mean, this is what you're doing. This is your 24/7. You are a shaman 24/7. It's not like you're doing this on the weekends kind of deal. And even so, I mean, you're even if that was the case, I mean, your level of giftedness, it kind of just doesn't matter, because you show up. You have your process that you go through, which I found to be very interesting, because I've never worked with a shaman before. And to have that process, I thought was pretty cool how you go through a little bit. So why don't you tell about the 4 different areas that you as a shaman, that you look through when you're starting to work with people?
Sure. So I think what distinguishes shamanism, first of all, it's sort of a broad envelope. It's sort of a non-institutionalized, non-hierarchical, right, very primal way to heal and empower, right? And it's grown in complexity with the complexity of society, so that it stays open like that, which is great. And so what it does is addresses the basic premise or approach is that we have 4 layers to our being, to everything. And we're very familiar in the West with the physical and the mental, right? The mind and the physical world, the experiential world, the theater, as we call it, where you're having experiences through your health, your relationships, your work, and your resources. And then the mind, which is the psycho-spiritual, everything we do at the frontal lobe, like the positive thinking, prayer, meditation, visualization, talk therapy, coaching, mental toughness, And then what shamanism recognizes is that there's these other 2 layers of our being that also have a tremendous influence on what we're experiencing in the world, what we're manifesting. So the 3rd layer is the mythic. And these are kind of like unconscious stories, archetypal stories that are what we call extra psychic. They're not just in your mind. They're sort of more of a field of consciousness, and stories that are like from religion, culture, family, society, things like no pain, no gain, or life is a struggle, or life is a school, or life is a battle, these world views. And those have a very powerful influence on us without us even knowing it, usually. So they can sort of contradict all the stuff we've done in terms of our mind work, mindfulness work. And so shamans want to make sure those are aligned with. So if you're trying to change the belief that I'm always have in battle of some kind, whether it's at work or your health or whatever, we want to change that myth that I'm only valuable when I'm in battle to I'm valuable when I'm playing. I'm valuable. I'm just life is a theater. And so we have ways of accessing that, and that's the mythic. I mean, that's the ritual, the ceremony, the images, the symbols, the art, the music, the poetry, the totem poles, and the animal totems, and the vision boards, and destiny altars, and ancestor altars. Like that's how we access the mythic. It's like modern sales and marketing does the same thing. They don't just say buy our shoes. They make you run the fastest. Here's the data. They have a Puma. Right, and everybody goes out and buys the Pumas, right? Because they're sort of true. So and religions use that as well, that layer. So it's a very powerful point to address issues and very important layer to address. And then the sort of furthest upstream, the sort of reason we might have been born into the myths we were born into for like the 10th time is the soul. It's the luminous energy field. It's the aura and chakras in Sanskrit. It's anima in Italian. It's l'âme in French. Everybody's got a name for it in every language. It's your essential self. It's the you that is you after your physical body's gone and can't wait to come back and play in the theater, especially when it's right side up and it's more pleasure than pain and it's more comedy than tragedy, kind of back in the garden, so to speak. But that is the part that shamans, like in the way I've been trained, like to address first, because it's like the blueprint. You know, if you build a building and it's faulty, right, the elevators don't work or something like that, you can keep trying to adjust them and jerry-rig them and do all kinds of stuff to try and like work around and try to get it to work, or you can go back to the blueprint and you can fix the blueprint, and then the building sort of fixes itself, or, you know, it's easier to fix correctly, you know, and more efficiently. So that's the process. We address the sort of the luminous body, the soul first, with these processes, and then I have my clients do the mythic layer essentially as homework, which is very simple, and then all the other work that's done, you know, the psycho-spiritual work, is much more easy and more effective, kind of easier to get results from more efficiently. Mm-hmm. So that's I don't know if you wanted me to talk about the 5 steps.
Sure. You know, I'd love for you to share that with our listeners, because when you were going through those steps during our time together, when I had an appointment with you, it was really interesting how you went through each one, and it resonated with me. I can say, okay, that makes sense. And the things that you were bringing up, it was easy for me to go, gosh, you know, I totally get what you're doing. And I'd love for our listeners to get a sense of that as well.
Sure. Yeah. So when it comes to this healing process, which, you know, is the title of the show, Mastering Your Path, right? To become a master of your theater, of your life experience, of your, you know, of your life and your path and your work. This is, you know, the more sort of free from influences and the more empowered you are, I think, you know, the easier it is to do that. And these influences come, like I said, on the level of the deepest level, the level of the energy body, okay? They come from patterns, energetic patterns or imprints, or sort of threads or influences or connections I'll talk about in more detail. But these patterns and imprints are there because when, you know, normal life happens, which is both pleasure and pain, mostly pleasure, hopefully, and occasional contrast, the way that we process and release those painful moments is we cry, we scream, we yell, we process it at a gut level until we can't anymore. And then the heavy energy we can't process goes out the base of our body, the first chakra, into the earth, you know, basically at the perineum, into the earth, and gets mulched and turned into new energy, just like our food. You know, we don't rationalize, talk about, analyze our food. We put it in our gut, we burn it with acid. The ash we can't process goes out the base of our body into the earth and gets mulched and turned into new food, right? Which is great. It's a nice deal. But for, like, you know, several thousand years now, since the feminine has been suppressed, we've been told, don't cry, don't get angry, you know, be rational, right? Be stoic, be masculine. Think about it. Don't be feminine. Don't be hysterical, right? You know, everything from the neck down became, you know, lesser than or evil, right? And so as a result, we've been blocking, you know, the release of a lot of heavy energies. And then they've created imprints. And I guess the good news in a way is that there's only 6 of those painful human experiences. There's infinite ways the story can play out, who does what to whom and how, the mechanisms, but the core experiences are loss, abuse, betrayal, abandonment, neglect, and engulfment, bondage. So, you know, you could lose a car, lose a friend, lose your house, lose a job. It's just loss. So to shamans, it's kind of incidental, the details of how it happened, but the core experience that keeps playing out and repeating is what we want to remove, the influence. So the first step in that is a process where we simply, it's called mikwi in Quechua, my Karo teacher's language, which is like combustion or digestion. And that's the one I call the energetic enema. So it's like we use my healing stone. Yeah, sorry.
No, we'll use your language on that one.
That's I use very practical language when it comes to this stuff. It's not very flowery, but basically, these stones that go through my healing journey, my shamanic initiations and training process, they do the work of this mikwi, so they will combust or digest those heavy energies and remove them from your energy field and return them to the earth where they should have gone in the first place. And that's why it's like an energetic enema, basically. But it goes all the way back to the first version, and you might be on version 30, of that kind of experience, So though that's the first step, it removes it, and it's all non-local, so it's outside of ordinary space and time, linear space and time. That's only convenient in the theater. So it takes me longer to talk about it than the actual process. So the energy, and I could do it over the phone and Skype, the other side of the planet, sometimes even retroactively or, outside of linear time. So we clear those old wounds. That's the first step from your past lives, etc. The second step is to make sure that you're not living out your ancestors' loss, abuse, betrayal, abandonment, neglect, or engulfment. So
I thought that was a huge thing. That was such a big deal because most people don't even think about that.
Right. That's true. I get a lot of people who've done a tremendous amount of healing, in a lot of different ways, and more often than not, that piece is missing. They're still struggling with something in their life, and it's because there's, still an ancestral influence going on. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, and the reason is that there's a process, there's a mythic ritual that we used to do when we became adults, post-puberty or whatever. They would bring you and your parents out to the village square or whatever, and they would tie you to the vine, and they'd cut the vine, and they'd split a tree and pass you through a tree or a hole in the ground and say, okay, your true mother's the earth, your true father's the sun. Go grow your own food, raise your own family. They're your biological parents, or whoever raised you is done. Their job is done. They're not responsible for you. You're not responsible for them. Go. And if you like them, you can still have tea. If you don't, you never have to see them again, right? Because they weren't always nice people.
Yeah.
But basically what it did is it cut the energetic thread that otherwise kept you connected through the generations. And it was a kind of signal informing your energy field, again, of that story or that experience that would then find its way to you and play out. So it's a huge part, right? So we do that clearing. And the mythic homework for that is the ancestor altar, right? Make sure they stay on the altar and they don't follow you around. We feed them, we give them food and drink. So it's like, look, I love you, I appreciate you, no hard feelings, everything's cool, the way you did it was fine, I forgive you for any way you fell short with me, but that's it. I'm not yours anymore. I'm a free agent,
Yeah.
So we could leapfrog. We could do better. If your children aren't sort of better, faster, stronger, smarter than you, then we end up in caves with clubs after a few generations, right? We sort of should do better than our parents, right, in a way?
Yeah, like for sure.
Student, right.
Yeah, and not carry their baggage,
Oh, completely, right, right. So we have an opportunity to be more masterful, right, than they were.
Yeah.
And it's also true in shamanism in terms of the student-teacher relationship. The teacher, right, it's like the antithesis to sort of these guru and these hierarchical traditions, right? The teacher recognizes the student is far better, right? We'll leapfrog them. We give them, in the initiation rites, we give them everything we have learned and our teachers before us had learned and accumulated so that they could go further, and we encourage that. So anyway, so we clear the ancestral threads. In that process, too, there's an opportunity to clear any entities, like Uncle so-and-so who died when you were 4 and took up attached to you because they were drunk or something and they felt at home, and then but they're influencing you to go out drinking all the time. Like, this is an actual case, where this young woman was an alcoholic, but it really wasn't her. And all the psychotherapy work and all the other work wasn't quite getting it done. And so when I did the work on her, it was extracting and sending to the light, more healed, this uncle. And so she was no longer had the impulse to drink because she didn't have his influence. So the more, people hear about these things, like exorcism would be the more extreme case, right? Mm-hmm. With the particularly nasty, malicious, or wounded, entity or being of sorts. And it runs the spectrum. So, it's kind of rare, but we definitely clear anything out there. And then, and there's also kind of like, interestingly enough, these sort of crystallized energies, like an old bullet wound or an old injury from the past that could still energetically be in the field. And people have that sore shoulder. They've always had a bad shoulder. And then we pull out the spear from 3 lifetimes ago and their shoulder's better. So that's an interesting part of it.
It's amazing how that all, is interconnected and how that all works. And a lot of times people just don't think about the energies of the people that they've grown up and how that affects them and how that shapes their life. And then having an appointment, like an appointment with you, really helps people to shed those things.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. Ultimately, the point of shamanism, it's this practical, pragmatic approach of how do we just make your life better. It's not about talking about and philosophizing about all this stuff. That's fine, or having a spiritual experience. That's fine. But my teachers would say, that's great, but how do you grow corn with it? How's your health, your relationships, So it always comes back to just, is it working? Can we get it to work, and have your quality of life improve? So, and your power and your mastery. So the third step essentially is the soul retrieval step, which I think a lot of people have heard of, and it's related to post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma, disempowerment, losing, victim, perpetrator, rescuer trap, right? Mm-hmm. And any time we have a painful experience or a traumatic experience where we perceive it, right, because all of our reality and our perception is, our experience is based on our perception, right? So if we perceive it as victim or perpetrator or rescuer, then a part of the quantum of energy of our soul literally stays in that moment. And we carry on, but we have dissociation or post-traumatic stress disorder because we're missing the passion and the gifts that part held. And we've made some funny contracts that tend to continue to play out, like life is not safe or love equals abuse, for a young person who's abused by their father, let's say, or mother. And so when we do that process, we literally go back in time to the moment of that trauma. We change the perception from victim to not. Yes, that hurt. It was extremely painful, but I'll be fine. It's all, we're all going to be okay. And then we bring that part of them back with the passion and the gifts it held so they're whole again. And we change the contract to love is warm, nurturing, kind, and supportive, let's say. And then that becomes their new life experience going forward. So that's a really powerful process. And then essentially the fourth process that I do in the session is what we call destiny retrieval. Mm-hmm. And that's like, you can tell me your goals, right, mentally, frontal lobe to frontal lobe, as I say, right? We could talk about it like coaching and therapy, you know, what do you really want? You know, what your ideal experience is around your health, your relationships, your work, your resources. Or you can make a picture of it, a vision board, a destiny altar, right? Some art, music, poetry that anchors it, that holds it at that level. That's even better, right? And then I can also, through this process called left-eye tracking and also through a journey, I can go forward in time or have you go forward in time and find the energetic patterns of that ideal future and bring those in. So that organizes your luminous architecture with those patterns, and that's what's influencing you. So you're being influenced by your ideal rather than the past wounds and stories.
And what a big difference that makes, you know, to be able to start walking your path without all this influence that you don't even know, most people don't even know that's affecting their lives.
Yeah, it's really the difference of swimming upstream or downstream, right?
That's a good analogy.
Right? You can do all the wonderful work out there for years about, you know, getting that dialed in, right? But if you're swimming against all these energetic and mythic patterns, right, that are trying to manifest something else, it's just, it's work. But if you do this first, then you go do all that other, right, work. Then it's like, it's so much more efficient to me and quick, you know, and graceful. It's really a matter of accepting the grace of the ability to access these levels and do that. You know, it's sort of this wonderful gift. It's very unconditional, really. These non-physical teams that we work on pray to, you know, whether it's your own religion or a shamanic lineage or a spiritual lineage, you know, when we ask for help from them, they're not saying, well, maybe tomorrow I've got, you know, something to do, or you weren't very good yesterday, so I'm not going to help you today, right? They just help. Yeah. They show up and they help you, and that's grace, right? It's unconditional. And I approach the work that way myself as much as I can. You know, physically I'm obviously limited by space and time, so I can't always show up, but I try to be as unconditional as I can. I don't judge. You know, we're taught not to judge. We're taught we can't be offended, and even in terms of payment, it's completely flexible. So I don't want anything to get in the way of the ability to show up for the work as best that I can. Obviously, I'm still obviously limited, but to me that's real shamanism. You know, it's this really unconditional approach to helping, and we know that works in terms of the non-physical teams that we work with and call on, and the power animals and all other aspects of nature, the stone people, the plant people, and so on, and the animals.
Yeah.
You see nature as conspiring.
Well, and you know, and to kind of go back a little bit, you know, you had talked about doing a soul retrieval, and I had never had that done. And it was interesting just to see how that process worked and how I felt afterwards. I mean, it was pretty dramatic.
Yeah, it is. And the beautiful thing of the soul retrieval and the destiny retrieval is you can actually, you know, most of these things require a shaman, right, to work with you, because there's certain parts of ourselves we can't get to. Like I use the analogy of a neurosurgeon. They could do surgery on their own leg, but not their motor cortex, because their hands will freeze, right? So there's times when we need to have somebody, you know, work with us, most often, right? And yet there's a couple of these things like the soul retrieval journey that you can do on your own. Like you can listen to a recording or something and do this journey and really have that experience that you had of when I did it for you, you know. The destiny retrieval journey, I actually have that on one of my CDs that someone can do to help go into the, you know, go up energy, you know, through this mythic ritual to go get the energy patterns of their future and bring them in. So that's the beauty of it. There's a lot of ways to do it. And, yeah, It's really powerful. You know, in the fifth step, I didn't talk about yet, but it's the shadow work, right, which you're familiar with. You know, after we've healed the big wounds, right? Mm-hmm. Byron Katie's work and Debbie Ford, Dark Side of the Light Chasers. You know, we heal the big wounds. We heal the ancestral stuff. We do the soul retrieval, the extractions, the destiny retrieval. At that point, right, the only thing that continues to sort of bring us difficult experiences, right, whether it's, you know, people we run into and their behaviors and stuff that we can't stand, it's the shadow work, right? So at that point, it's good to embrace that part of you, right, and love it completely and improve your quality of life that way. But it's nice to do these other steps first because it makes it easier. It's hard to embrace the violence in you when you're still carrying the wound of being violated, right, or being the violators from, you know, for example, or the ancestral piece and what have you, or the soul loss. So, yeah.
Well, but there are a lot of people with that, too, you know, that they have that going on where there's been some tragedy that's happened in their life, whether, you know, it's a violation of some sort or loss or, you know, lack of trust, something's happened.
Yeah. Oh, unfortunately, right, it's ubiquitous, right? I mean, it's been, again, thousands of years since we've not properly processed those wounds, you know, ever since, again, the feminine was suppressed. And so, yeah, most people have something, you know, that has that can be worked on this way and help improve, you know, again, their freedom, their power, their mastery, just to, you know, and it doesn't mean things don't happen anymore, right? Yeah. Stuff still happens, painful stuff, but it's how long we hold on to it, right? It's how much it still influences us. Can we cry and scream and yell in the moment, release it, or are we still thinking about it a month later and it's still affecting our life, you know? So it's you know, I don't want people to think that this is about sort of creating a life of just all hot fudge sundaes and no, you know, bitter food.
That'd be an interesting journey if that happened.
Yeah, or controlling other people's you know, if I do this, maybe I'll never run into, you know, this kind of person again. No, it's a theater. It's still happening, and we wouldn't have it any other way. But it's the mastery, right? It's how long can you do you not hold on to it? Can you process it, release it, and just move on? Like, it's all that stuff, right? It's really being able to, no matter, because 5 people can witness the same experience and have 5 completely different experiences of it, right? Mm-hmm. From horror to bliss, whether it's a volcano erupting or a tsunami or an earthquake, doesn't matter. It's your experience, right? It's Viktor Frankl stuff, right? It's how do you master your experience regardless of what anyone else does or doesn't do? That's the key.
That is the key. That's what it's all about, because it's you know, not mastering anything else around you, just your own personal journey, that inner journey.
Yeah, your experiences, exactly.
Well, and what's cool is, like, when we did our session together, it was my session. You didn't have a session. Anyway, we did the session. I mean, it was very interesting because, you know, you also have a spirit animal that comes in and you get a few messages. So it's very interactive. And, you know, and some people get a spirit animal. Maybe it's not one that they would like, and it's just something that you have to read on and see what the totem for that animal is. And a lot of times you're amazed what you get.
Yeah, exactly. You know, these are things that would have been taught to us in grade school, right, if we hadn't been cast out of the garden, so to speak, right? We have this knowledge of the animals in nature and how they work for us, when they show up and how they show up. I mean, that's, you know, these are all parts of, again, shamanism that are kind of not understood. We're not worshiping animals. We're just using their characteristic and instinct when we need it, you know, like the decisiveness of the cat or the boundaries of the skunk or what have you. It's just practical. It's like tools. It's mechanical. It's like technician tools. You know, and the other thing that people, I think, get a little misunderstood about with shamanism is confusing it with sorcery, right, which can use a lot of the same tools and techniques, but the sorcerer uses it to disempower people, to take something from them and keep it for themselves, or to, get a lot of money from somebody to do a curse on, their enemy or whatever, and then keep in that relationship of you need me to do that and protect you, what have you, right? And the shaman's like, no, we don't want to engage that way. It's not efficient. It's a waste of energy, and it's ultimately not really ethical nor of service. We want to empower the person not to have enemies in the first place, right? Or not to, do you know what I mean? So
it's all about empowerment. Mm-hmm.
It's all about empowerment. Exactly. And so therefore we don't guru for somebody. We're just their mechanic, right? Like we're their auto mechanic. We don't tell them how and when to drive their car, right? Mm-hmm. So we just clear the way for them to do anything they want in life, but, to be their own guide, right? To follow their own guidance, to be the masters of their own, do you know what I mean? And then to be able to call on guides, in quotes, or teams to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish, but nobody to tell them what to do or what they should want, right? So that's an interesting, that gets confusing for people, that part, right? There's little nuances, like karma, for example, the way I learned it, in the Hindu traditions and so on, right, was if you do something hurtful, cause pain, then that pain will be caused to you at some point, right? And it's like, not really, right? Because the experience of pain, whether you're the victim, the perpetrator, or the rescuer, is the same. So if you're still holding the pattern of that pain in you, right, that didn't get processed and released, then regardless of whether you were the quote-unquote victim, perpetrator, or rescuer, it can show up in your experience in any of those ways again.
Yeah.
So
you'll see that pattern repeat.
Exactly. So it's not like there's a judge or a scorekeeper kind of doling out justice, right? It's more energetic patterns that are creating experiences, and it's sort of it's the same amount of pain whether you're one of those three. You know what I mean? Whether you're on the receiving end or the giving end, essentially. So that's different, right? That shamanic approach to that is just a little bit nuanced, right? Because one disempowers and one empowers, right? It's freedom.
It is. I found it to be all about freedom, because a lot of times, it's not about, and we kind of talked about this actually before you and I had my appointment. It's not about seeing people time and time again. I mean, sometimes people need that. But you work a lot with people where you only get to see them that one time, and then they're off and doing their thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the approach that I've taken. Like I said, it's really bad business practice, but I've never been a business person, so I don't care. But but it's like I could spread it out to multiple sessions, right? We joked about that, but I think once we get to the core and we do this really powerful work at that core level, right? Change the blueprint, right? Get it dialed into what's going to support your journey, right? In your own theater, your own, writing your own script. And then you do the mythic homework, at that point, right? The rest is the psycho-spiritual work, which is the coaching and the daily mindfulness practices and spiritual practices. That's all good and hugely important stuff to do to support the ultimate, manifestation of your ideal life, right? But that part you don't need me for. You know what I mean? Like I've done my bit. Now,
and I can see where people would come to you though, if they're seeing another pattern come up or something else that they're having a tough time with, so that they can work through that.
Yes, life is, again, it's still kind of upside down out there, right? We don't get to cry and scream and yell every time we experience pain, so people can get kind of mucked up again, right? So I do see people sometimes for just the maintenance, of the energy body in that regard, or like the tracking part, which is more the coaching and the psycho-spiritual work. Like, what is it that you're really, what's really going on here? What do you really want, experientially versus what you think you want? Like, I do work with people still a little at that level, multiple times or what have you. But yeah, it probably
just depends on the person,
It depends a lot on the person. And ultimately, though, if you think about it, right, if we're successful being driven by this vision, in my particular vision of this world of, children playing in the theater together, right, just empowered, free beings, playfully creating, more complex and interesting scripts, the sort of shaman's view of the world, of nature, seeking greater complexity and so on, then I'm kind of putting myself out of business, right, in that regard. Like, in other words, it would be nice if we just processed things naturally and cried and screamed and yelled when things were, kept our power, and then I wouldn't have anything to do on that level.
Yeah.
Right? So that is my, the reason I get up every day is because eventually I'd love to be living in that world. I don't know how long it's going to take. I wish it was 50 years ago, right, when I was 4. And I wish it would be tomorrow, but I'm getting old enough to realize it might be a couple hundred more years in reality. I don't know, unless there's a miracle, right, which would be great. But it's like, just like now we're seeing the return of the family, like like I've talked about it for 20 years now, the whole sort of solution to every problem on the planet is women being in charge, is the 80-20 thing being flipped, right, where women are running 80% of everything. And, the masculine is courageous enough to support that without suppressing it out of fear. Like that's my core. That's what I think is going to be the real, sort of ideal world. It's the matriarchal, it's sort of how these indigenous primal cultures did live healthy, peaceful, sustainable lives, till it got flipped around. So that's like, I'd love to see that and be in that world,
Well, and it feels like it's emerging with all the changes that are coming to fruition at this point. And, from many of it's been from kind of a catalyst from the Me Too movement, that women are, being heard. They've been speaking out. You hear a lot of these women that are speaking out year after year, and they're finally being heard and coming together to say we need new standards when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it. Just like that's the awareness part, right? A lot of us were aware this has been happening, like I said, like my whole life, right? It's been obvious that it's like Me Too is every woman. I don't see any woman who hasn't been, subject to this, right? And so now, yes, it's finally like, I think I've seen that as the vision of women really sticking together, right? Because the physical overpowering that a man might have means nothing when there's 10 women going, hey, stop, right, and settle down and, get in line and, and so, I think that's a part of it. And, I think I've talked about this. I wrote about it in my book, and I've talked about it for decades now. It seems that this fear-driven masculine, the wounded masculine, as people say, right, and sort of fear-driven, that was the cause of all this flipping over in the first place. It takes courage to face, a volcano, a jungle, a jaguar, a powerful woman, right? These are we call it the wild, untamable feminine. It's beautiful, amazing. It's wonderful. It's the whole purpose for being on this planet. This amazing, rich, diverse theater, messy, wonderful. And it takes courage to be able to stand in it and serve it, even when it's frightening, right? Even when it can kill you or it can hurt you, But that's the whole point, is to have the courage. The masculine in all of us, women and men, right, need the courage to support and serve and allow the feminine to be at its full, wild, untamable nature, you might say, and power. And so I know that, or I suspected that the masculine would kick and scream its way out of this. It would, right, sort of, I'd rather blow up the field than lose the game kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what a lot of people are seeing, and again, it's messy and maybe not the most graceful way to do it, but who cares? As long as we get there, we got to get it done. My teachers would say it's the hard way or the easy way, right? We blow it all up and then realize it's not working and do it right, or we try to heal all those wounds, right, which is what I'm doing every day. And all my colleagues, of 80% of whom are women, this is not, shamans are mostly women, not men. That's another of the fallacy. But, or gay men, that kind of thing. It's healing the wounds so we could be courageous and in our power and not victims and perpetrators and rescue, and then have, yes, the feminine be in charge and stick together and unite as is natural, and the masculine to serve. Yeah, it
we're just such a great time in history, so it just is nice to be able to have people like you as a resource to help us make these changes that we're looking to make, either personally or in some part of our life when we're having some kind of discourse. And you even find things that are hidden, which I had lots of fun with that one.
Well, yeah, so, the hidden stuff, right? That's it. And it's, yeah. And it's exciting. I'm excited because I see so many people, students that are just incredibly powerful and gifted and taking it well beyond I ever have. And so it's exciting because it's happening, it's working, and it's a great time to be a part of it, part of the solution.
So
best we can, doing the best we can, obviously.
All of us doing the best we can, for
not
sure.
Not perfect, that's for sure, but I'm trying really hard. I'm doing the best I can, and I really am. Yeah.
Well, and so I wanted to see where our listeners can connect with you and be part of your community.
Well, let's see. I have a website that a really nice friend of mine put together. It's shamanjon.com. I'm on Facebook. I've kind of tried my best to get with all those programs, right? So I think I'm Shaman Jon is my page, or Shaman Jon Rasmussen is my, public page or what have you. I think I'm on Instagram as Shaman Jon and all that. So that's all ways to sort of keep track, and email me anytime, of course, Jon at Shaman Jon, which is without the H, Jon, Jon at shamanjon.com. And I just love doing my work, and I love answering questions and trying to, like I said, do the best I can to bring some clarity and all to the situation. So. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many wonderful ways that we can improve ourselves, and it's just it's a fun and an exciting journey. And really, I think once people dive into it and start unraveling parts of their life that don't serve them anymore with, someone such as yourself, it really helps us to see, the world and, possibilities in a whole new way.
Yeah, it's a nice compliment to everything else out there. The way I look at it, it's an important thing to address those two layers in addition to everything else. So I think it's great.
Oh. Well, Shaman Jon, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm really honored and grateful for this opportunity.
Well, it's been such an honor and pleasure to have you here, Shaman Jon. I mean, my appointment with you was so profound, and again, could not wait to share you with everyone else as well. Even though you're shaman to the stars, you see everyone, not just celebrities. So it's nice to have somebody like you that people can go to. Again, if you'd like to learn more about Shaman Jon, you can visit his website at shamanjon, that's JON.com. We're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.